Good morning, class. This is Reader's Workshop. This is where I get to read to you, and you learn to fluctuate, change your voice, looking at punctuation marks as you're reading, and also think about the characters. Who are they? What are they? How do they affect each other? What problems might they create? Did they solve the problem? Are they kind? Are they nice? Are they young? Are they old? So, I picked traditional literature. Now, you might have read something of this topic, of this story, or you might have seen a movie. I know they did make movies of this. So, it's called Gulliver's Travels. And a little bit of tidbit about the original author, who is Jonathan Swift. He was in the late 1600s in the country of Ireland. So that was 400 years ago, many years ago. But it was also adopted by Lynn. That means she took the story and tweaked it and made it a little bit different in her own style. Lynn Seuss, and illustrated, drawn by David Wenz. Gulliver had recently returned from an adventure in Lilliput. In Lilliput, Gulliver was very large. The people and animals were tiny. They could fit in the palm on the inside, in the palm of his hand. When he returned home to London, people did not believe his tale, his story. "I can prove it," Gulliver said, and showed them the tiny cows he had brought back from Lilliput. Gulliver longed for more adventure. He wanted to go on another trip. So he joined up with the captain and a crew of ship called the Adventure. During the voyage, during the trip, the ship hit a mighty storm and was blown off course. When the storm passed, the captain spied land. He saw land. A dozen crew members and Gulliver went to explore it. On the beach, Gulliver wandered off from the rest of the crew. He went off on his own. Gulliver heard shouting and turned back to see what was the matter. He could not believe what he saw. The crew members were rowing back to the ship. They were going back to the big ship. They were being chased by a giant. Gulliver was afraid more giants were around and about, so he hid behind a rock. He peeked out, but he did not see the giant. He also did not see his shipmates or the ship. He knew he had been left behind, so they took off without him. So there's Gulliver by the rock, and they're showing you a big giant on this land. Gulliver started to run. He ran as fast as he could until he found himself in the forest. Large, strange plants grew all around him. He thought the plants were unusual trees, but then he recognized them. The plants were huge stalks of corn. Then Gulliver heard a rumbling sound. The ground began to shake. He saw the giant that had chased his ship. He knew he had to hide. The giant walked toward Gulliver, and his steps were long. His feet were huge. Gulliver began to feel hopeless. He felt he had no luck. He would never be able to outrun the giant. The ground trembled. Then Gulliver was afraid he was going to be stepped on. The giant stopped and looked at the ground. He bent down and saw the little Gulliver. He reached down and picked up Gulliver and held him between his thumb and his forefinger, like that. Gulliver did not struggle. He didn't fight against it. Then the giant smiled and dropped Gulliver into his shirt pocket. So here's the giant catching Gulliver, and he's going to put him in his shirt pocket. The giant was a farmer who owned a cornfield. The ride inside the farmer's pocket was stuffy. It seemed like a long way to the farmer's house. When the giant took Gulliver out of his pocket, Gulliver took a deep breath and sneezed pocket fuzz out of his nose. The farmer put Gulliver on the kitchen table. When the farmer's wife saw Gulliver, she screamed. The sound was so loud, Gulliver had to cover his ears. "Why did you bring a bug into my house?" asked the farmer's wife. "He's not a bug," said the farmer. Gulliver uncovered his ears and bowed to the farmer's wife. She stopped yelling and looked at him. She saw how polite he was and smiled. "He's a man." "He's a man," said the farmer. "To think I almost stepped on him." At dinner, Gulliver met the farmer's children, and they were delighted with him. They were happy. Then the baby grabbed Gulliver and tried to put him in her mouth. The farmer's wife quickly rescued him. Gulliver wiped himself dry with a napkin and sat down to eat. The farmer's wife crumbled bread and cut little pieces of meat for his meal. She served him milk and a timble. That was the metal covering sewers would put on their thumbs, so when they're pushing the sewing needle through the cloth, they don't puncture. They don't get a hole in their thumb. Gulliver had trouble lifting the thimble, but he was very thirsty after all the excitement. Here you see the baby's trying to put Gulliver in his mouth, in her mouth. Of all the farmer's children, Gulliver liked the oldest daughter. She was very kind. She made him a cozy bed and a matchbox. She sewed tiny outfits for him. Gulliver liked the farmer's daughter best because she respected him as a man. The farmer's daughter spent many hours teaching Gulliver the language of the land. It was a strange language, but Gulliver quickly learned it. He learned that the land was called Brobdingnag. One day the farmer took Gulliver to the marketplace to show him off. He put Gulliver on a fruit stand, and people gathered close. "Amuse the people," the farmer said to Gulliver. Gulliver walked around on the fruit and pretended to fight with his tiny knife. He spoke the Brobdingnag language and even sang a song. The crowd clapped. Then the farmer took Gulliver to other cities. The daughter tried to protect Gulliver, but he still had to watch out for himself. Once a boy shot an acorn at Gulliver's head in a slingshot. The acorn was as big as a pumpkin to Gulliver. After a while, Gulliver got tired of performing. The wear could be seen on his little face, and the farmer's daughter worried. He was getting tired doing this. Then one day the royal court saw Gulliver perform. The queen of Brobdingnag was very fond of the strange things, and she loved Gulliver. "You must come and join our court," said the queen. "I will if the farmer's daughter can come too," Gulliver said. So here you see where the naughty little boy threw the acorn over here. Almost to Gulliver was big as a pumpkin and hit him in the head. The queen could not wait to show Gulliver to the king. "Why did you bring me a wind-up toy?" asked the king. "He is not a toy," said the queen. "He is a man." And the king did not believe her. He called his royal scholars to inspect the little man. The scholars poked at Gulliver for a long time. Finally, they decided that Gulliver really was a man. The king told the queen she should keep Gulliver, so the queen had the royal craftsman make a box for Gulliver to live in. The box had many rooms and windows. It even had a handle for carrying. Little things were made for Gulliver from the finest materials in the palace. He hung his clothes on pegs, little wooden things that stick out, made of gold and pins. Well, they weren't wooden. Usually they are. They made it out of gold because they had some money. He sat on a chair made of velvet pin cushion. He ate from dishes that were silver buttons from the queen's favorite dress. Gulliver liked life at the palace quite well, and he only had to perform for the queen a few special occasions. The farmer's daughter was also treated well. She had her own special things and many servants to take care of her. She was free to roam the palace grounds, and she always took Gulliver with her. Oh my gosh. This must be the Queen's dog, and he's carrying Gulliver in the mouth. The farmer's daughter took Gulliver out to the orchard where they grow trees with fruit, and to the seashore for fresh air. She was very careful with him, but there was many dangers to such a tiny person. One time a fallen apple almost crushed him. Another time the Queen's dog picked him up in its mouth before the farmer's daughter could stop it. Then one morning the farmer's daughter was sick. She was much too ill to go outside, so Gulliver asked a servant to take him to the beach. The servant carried Gulliver in his box to the seaside. Thinking Gulliver was safe, the servant left the box and took a walk along the shore. Gulliver was enjoying the view of the sea from his special house when an eagle picked up the box and flew away with it into the air. Oh my gosh. The eagle carried the box for miles over the sea before it dropped into the ocean. Gulliver was not sure where he was or if he could be found. Eventually, the captain of the English ship spied Gulliver's box floating in the sea. The crew had no idea what the huge box could be, because to them, that was probably the same size as Gulliver as the people, so the box would be big. They were even more amazed to find an Englishman like themselves inside. Gulliver was glad to be back among the people of his own size again. He told the crew about his adventures in the place called Brobdingnag, but they did not believe his tale. To prove it, he showed them one of the Queen's large silver dress buttons. Remember, he used that as a dish. And here the eagle was carrying him over the sea. And that's the end of the story. So, now this is your time to do the reading. Remember, fluctuate your voice, change the sound of your voice, and if you see quotation marks, change your voice to the character that's talking in the story. Remember about the character. Who are they? Why are they in the story? Was there a problem? Did they solve the problem, or did they cause the problem? If you have nobody to read to yourself. If you don't have any books, print one out from the district website or class tag. So, until next time, happy reading.